Hello and welcome back to the Practice Forward podcast. Today's themes: historic overlays, net zero civic work, and a firehouse that actually works at 2 a.m. And today we're here with architect Cole Mears on translating empathy into operational plans. How you doing, Cole? Good to see you today.
I'm doing great. It's good to be here.
Thanks for joining us. So you're joining us down from I guess kind of in the Sarasota area in Florida.
Yes, I'm right here in Sarasota. I live and work, and sunny Sarasota is pretty gloomy today, but it's a good place to be.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us here on Practice Forward, where we're looking at tech tools and ideas reshaping how architects actually practice. So Cole, just to introduce you, Cole Mears, AIA, is an architect at Sparkman, and they're working across public safety, civic, and education support from the Venice Fire Station #1 in a historic overlay to resilience forward stations. And he's published a white paper on empathy in architecture. So yeah, we do a lot of work with different fire stations and public safety projects with ScandaPlan. Obviously, having all that stuff really well indexed and thought through is mission critical, right? So has a whole different context, right? When you're designing for safety and efficiency in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. Fire stations, to me, I love working in fire station design. I enjoy doing all sorts of different things, but I find that, fire station owners are some of my favorite owners. They're decisive. They treat the project like it's their own home.
Mm-hmm.
And everything is designed to be both comfortable for the firefighters that are doing what they're doing, but also mission critical. It's really important to kind of get every aspect of the project right, from the plan and adjacencies to the details, and making sure that it's really, really important to know your owner, as it is with any project type. But in this case, the end user, the owners treat the end user like they're the most important thing, which is not something that you always get in developer work, for instance. So to me, I love it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sure. How can you how can you justify cutting corners on a fire station, right? I mean, so I mean, I think it's a really interesting niche. What's the first space for you that made you kind of feel like architecture, like you really felt like architecture was a thing for you? Was it, your childhood, or is it a job site, or is it like some kind of space that you think about still?
Yeah, so I grew up in Orlando, so I wasn't necessarily always surrounded by, excellent architecture all the time. We had
Right.
the Disney-fied version of architecture, and then downtown Orlando is kind of hit or miss in terms of what we have. And but I was fortunate to go to school a couple of blocks away from the Orlando Public Library, and we would do walking field trips there when I was first, second, third grade. And the Orlando Public Library was actually designed by John Johansson, who was one of the Harvard Five. And it's this brutalist chunk of concrete. It's not necessarily what I would design, but it is something that I really just remember being in awe by when I was a young kid. And to this day, I think about that building and just all of the weight and all of the beautiful spaces. I love it. That was kind of my first introduction to, we'll call it like capital A architecture, as much as I don't love that term.
Yeah.
But like a lot of architects as a kid, I always spent my time just building things and, Legos and drawing and doing various art. And so it was a natural fit.
Yeah. What's a belief that you got when you were in school or doing your first jobs that you still really live by? And what was one that you had to unlearn quickly?
Yeah. So when I was in college, I got introduced to Jan Giel. He's a Danish architect,
Uh-huh.
and his kind of ethos is, people first, then spaces, and then buildings. And
Okay.
I still 100% believe that. I think that
Yeah.
at the bottom, at the end of the day, making sure that you keep people first and focus on that, then the spaces come next and the buildings will follow behind, however they follow. The most important part, of course, is just making sure that the building is designed for human interaction. And so,
Yeah.
but in terms of unlearning, I think I think that I used to be a lot more snobbish in what I like and dislike in terms of architecture.
Uh-huh.
Time's gone by, and I still have the principles that I believe in, of course, but I've learned to embrace a lot of different architecture for what it is, rather than whether or not it's necessarily what I like. Um,
Yeah. I've certainly felt that way myself as I have learned more and more coming into this industry about, you know, how, the adaptive reuse of buildings is so important, really how the most green building is an existing building. So I've had to, you know, and then I think a lot of people are really looking at those kind of brutalist buildings like you were talking about with fresh eyes now. In terms of his the definitely evocative of a certain historic period. Not many people are making them that way anymore.
yeah, I
Uh,
mean, in college, I had a professor that described brutalism as sort of an architect's architecture in a
uh-huh.
way. A
Yeah.
lot of other people outside architecture don't always necessarily appreciate it. I think recently, in the last couple of days, I think our current presidential administration announced a ruling that all civic buildings at the federal level are, there's shows preference toward classical architecture.
Hmm.
And that's kind of in keeping with some movements I think that over the years have gone on in the UK and other places. And um, yeah, I mean, there is something that is still very monumental and shows a sense of stability in the brutalist architecture that we've done at the civic scale that I don't think always works at like the scale of affordable housing, for instance. I listened to one of your recent podcasts talking about kind of the brutalist affordable housing and how that's been kind of a blight on some of those communities. But at the civic scale, I think it still works, but it's not.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what outside of the world of architecture, do you have like any people that are really like living rent free in your head in terms of inspiration, whether that's from the arts or other kind of heroes that you may have?
Um, yes, in a sense. I grew up, I played a lot of team sports, and I had a focus on wrestling. I was fortunate to have an amazing high school wrestling coach, Mike Palazzo.
Hmm.
And he had kind of an unrelenting work ethic, gave us a lot of gems over the years, but his kind of, when I'm feeling frustrated, or when I'm feeling like procrastinating, or if I'm feeling like, I'll get to it, or whatever the case is, he's still living in my brain going, get to work. He had an Ambrose Redmond quote that was on our wall that said, the time will come when winter will ask what you've been doing all summer. And I never forget that. And so, to me, I still kind of approach architecture a little bit like a team sport. Even
Yeah.
within practice, I think that team is so important, and making sure that you have the right people in the right spots makes
Yeah.
the process go so smoothly compared to if you just put anybody anywhere and expect the work to get done.
Wow. So let's get into talking about some of your projects. So there's this project in it's a fire station number 1. It's the City Hall in Venice, Florida. Oh, is this the City Hall and the fire station, or it's connected?
They're all connected.
Uh-huh.
I love talking about this project.
Okay.
I don't know if it's one of our most publicized projects by any means, but it was such a great opportunity. The city of Venice is they actually had John Nolan master planned the city of Venice back in the 1920s.
Uh-huh.
And he's kind of the founder, or one of the founders, I guess, of new urbanism.
Okay.
And so his kind of initial plans for the city of Venice became the inspiration for what became Seaside, Florida, which is
Uh-huh.
another pretty famous planned development. And he had this concept for a civic campus, I guess you would say. So
Yeah.
with public safety, I think there was a fire station as well as the city hall and maybe even the police station all on one block. And parts of it got built, but then the Depression came along and wiped out a lot of it.
Ah.
And so
When was this built? This was in early 30s or
late
uh,
20s is when
okay.
is when it started.
Uh-huh.
And so at any rate, they did wind up building a fire station that was on the site next to the city hall. They shared kind of a parking lot, but that was it. And that the fire station was built in the 50s or early 60s, and the original part of the city hall was built around the same time.
Okay.
And over the years, the city hall expanded, and the original one was like very modernist, very kind of minimalist, and they came in and they did this really big renovation and expansion that turned it into this kind of 1980s Pomo, vaguely historic. There's some vague historicism, but at the same time there was some of that kind of classic Pomo jokey aesthetic part of it. And we came in, and the existing fire station needed to go because it was completely just way outside of its service life. And we had the opportunity to reinterpret that original John Nolan master plan and reconceive of this block as a civic campus again. And because the way the funding was working and everything, and because the site was actually fairly small by the time that we needed to expand the city hall, we connected the two buildings together and created a fire station and city hall. There are some spaces that overlap between the two, some shared spaces, and it was a great experience. It had to be Venetian themed according to the overlay district.
Uh-huh.
But because we were butting up against that existing city hall, which had these kind of modernist elements that were still poking out from the original project, and some of these unusual postmodern elements, like these walls that were freestanding that had these arches in them, they didn't really do anything. They were just kind of almost a decorative element outside of the envelope of the project.
Uh-huh.
Context became really, really important, and
you kept postmodern details in your reuse of it, or
we did. I mean, we did a renovation. I mean, most of the existing city hall that was there remained. We just did some interior renovations and an expansion. So the city hall is what the city hall was, more or less. And our brief was to try and make a new fire station that had its own identity for sure, but spoke to the existing city hall. And so, we incorporated, I mean, some of the schemes range from being like ultra, Venetian, we studied some like very modern. We tried schemes. We tried ultra like Michael Graves style postmodernism. And what we wound up settling on was a good balance that was tasteful, but at the same time spoke to that existing city hall. I'm really proud of it.
Oh, you should be. It's really, it feels very integrated. I mean, I wouldn't even necessarily guess that it had all those different layers of history to it. It's, when you look at it, it's not what I would ever think of as a look for a fire station. One thing is you guys have a spiral slide, like you would find in like a amusement park here, instead of a fire pole, which is really, but it's all like very, it's all very like charcoal and off-white and very, I don't know. It definitely feels like it's influenced by a lot of that aesthetic of the time when it was designed in the 20s, right? It's has a sort of neo Art Deco kind of feel, I guess. And it's really beautiful. Nice work.
Thanks. Funny story about that pole. So the fire station, or the fire department at the time, the site necessitated that we do a 2-story fire station, and those are great in a lot of ways, but they can be challenging in other ways because response time issues and everything else. The firemen have to make their way from the second floor down to the ground floor, getting their truck, getting their apparatus and everything. But insurance these days is making it more challenging for some fire departments to be able to use fire poles. So they requested us to look in the slides, and it was a first for us. And we looked into it, and we couldn't see any issues as to why we necessarily wouldn't do it. But yeah, the slide didn't wind up working as well as we would have hoped. We've had a couple clients come to us since then asking like, hey, we saw that you did a fire slide. That looks pretty great. Why don't we try it? And we kind of have to advise them, it did seem like a good idea, but by the time they spiral 6 times or whatever it is on the way down, they get kind of banged up a little bit in the spins. They don't wind up using it very often. It winds up working out well for when they have like tours and everything like that. But
well, who knows? Maybe you guys will take that and recycle it into some of your residential or educational projects.
There we go. Yeah.
All right. I mean, I could see that being a really fun thing in an office.
It was fun to watch the mayor go down.
So did you guys go back and look at the original designs from the 20s? Was that a big influence for you when you redesigned this?
Well, we didn't really have access. There was no real designs. There was just a master plan from the 20s. But we did have access to a variety of the different as-built drawings or some of the record drawings rather, from the original 1960s City Hall, and then the 1973 renovation, and then the 1980s renovation. And so we had those for reference, and that was really interesting to be able to peel back all of the layers of that existing building and see kind of what was what. And there are elements of the building that were, it's one of those projects where, because the building was, I think its last major renovation was in the 80s. A lot of the staff, they didn't love working in this building. It felt dated to them. There was parts of it that just really weren't working. It was crammed. And as we started to study it, I'll speak for myself on this. I came to really fall in love with some of the details of it. Like, as kind of wild as it is, I came to appreciate it for what it is. And my kind of internal brief was, while we're going to work really hard at giving them what they need, I would really love for them to re-fall in love with this building as it is. So, we gave the interior certainly a facelift, and credit to our great interiors team that worked really hard at some of those lobby spaces and things like that. And yeah, we built such a good rapport with them throughout the process. We're working on another fire station with City of Venice right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Florida has such a design signature that seems to kind of come from that period about 100 years ago. And I was down there. I went to the Ring-a-Ling campus and checked out some of the museums and the mansion that I guess it was Bailey built it from his circus empire. And just, it's really, I mean, of course, it's like very ersatz from all these sort of Italian and European influences, but I think it's pretty unique to Florida. And that's, I guess, where you are is sort of a big, cultural and, representational kind of hub, right? I mean, it's amazing to think about this circus empire and how big it was, like bigger than Hollywood, at the time, before movies.
That's a great point. Yeah, city of Sarasota is a cool place to be. I mean, this whole area, because we've had multiple eras of booms that have brought their own sort of architectural flourishes to the area and the community. And as a result, our community takes a lot of pride in its public work. In a way that not every municipality in Florida does. We have the kind of famed quote unquote Sarasota School of Architecture, where Paul Rudolph and Jack West and a variety of great architects came out of, and so that still looms large in our kind of architectural heritage. I think pretty much every architect that works in the area is at least owes a great debt of gratitude to those folks for making architectural discourse a thing in our community. Makes it a little easier to propose interesting and experimental architecture, or interesting and maybe a little bit on the avant-garde side when we're in public works, whereas maybe in some part in the middle of the state they don't necessarily have that same heritage or the same background.
Right.
But to your point, the whole Ringling grounds is even predates that, and that stuff is great. I visit there fairly regularly.
Yeah, and we went to this crazy Italianate mansion that he built. It's
the Cottazon.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just, I think it's amazing that he wanted to bring that kind of culture and sophistication to that area. Anyway, getting back to these fire stations, right? So this is interesting to me, like the kind of what you think about in terms of the function that needs to happen there. So a lot of it is about the firemen need to deploy themselves in 90 seconds. Is that right? So they and a lot of your design is about kind of shaving those seconds down, and those very small design decisions when like every second is critical, right? Is that a big part of the design that you think about in terms of fire stations?
Yeah, absolutely. When we're working on fire station design, we are balancing the first thing we have to always figure out is the plan, and make sure that wherever you're coming from to the apparatus bay is a reasonably direct access or close distance. We make sure that and some of those some of that stuff comes down to like plan adjacencies and that kind of thing. But in addition to those sort of plan adjacency discussions, and another layer of it is all of the detailing surrounding it. So making sure that, the lighting is appropriate, because when
Right.
you're spilling out of your dark bunk, because you know, the firefighters that are working during the day shift, a lot of times, they're on oftentimes for, um, you know, long shifts. And so they try and get sleep when they can. And
Mhm.
oftentimes that's in the middle of the day. And so, whereas in most project types, you want a lot of natural light into most of the spaces, a common theme that we get is we want as little light as possible into the bunks. And, because we want this to be pitch black while we're sleeping. And so easing their transition from going from a dark space into the brightness of the apparatus bay where the trucks are, we create like low level lighting so that as they spill out of the bunks, they don't get glare, because that can be highly disorienting.
Right.
We coordinate all of the systems so that it's optimized for fire station response. They have an entire system of alerting system that is critical to that process as well. So kind of from top to bottom, it's about making sure that we consider that experience of going from a dead sleep to a full-on sprint, and making sure that they are as comfortable as possible through that.
Right. So, so yeah, it's also like so how many, a whole number of firefighters all need to deploy at the same time, right? And so it's all about, making sure that they all have their own critical path, and there's no dirty crossings where people are bumping into each other. It's a real choreography like that, right?
It is. So you got to be careful about blind corners. You got to be careful about which direction doors open, even when it's not necessarily critical to egress.
Yeah.
Good example would be, oftentimes, the stair the stair that's coming down, if you've got well, let me back up. Say you have an apparatus bay, and access to the apparatus bay to the front door, you would ordinarily need that door to open in the direction toward the front door, right? So for the purpose of egress. And, while obviously we can't say, we can't make the project unsafe from a life safety code standpoint, we have to consider, okay, well, how do we give them another access door through the apparatus bay so that we can flip the door swing so that they're not having to pull the door open into the apparatus bay. They can push and go. So there's
Right.
a lot of things like that we have to figure out, making sure that you have, lights in your doors where you need them. Fire stations have so many different technical requirements from a resiliency standpoint. All of these things have to kind of play together, and it's quite a choreography, as you were saying.
Yeah. Do you guys at different stages actually do like role playing where everybody kind of like tries to do the 90-second sprint?
It's a great idea. We haven't done that, but we've over the years we've tried to run some simulations. I mean, at this point in time, we've done enough of them where we have a pretty good baseline to understand kind of where you're going from and where you're getting to, and
Right.
just coordinating those adjacencies so that it works together.
Yeah.
We don't have to do that level of kind of detail at
Sure.
this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, so let's just say hypothetically, we wanted to design with you, you know, a prefab fire station, right? And we wanted to put 50 of them all over America in different places, right? What would you say should be like totally standardized in that template? And then what would you say, just one example, like would have to really be totally custom and spec to every single different location that you were going to be in?
Yeah, that's tough because all of the spaces are sized according to the number of staff that's deployed there.
Uh-huh.
And so like there are two base stations, 3 base stations, 4 bays, 5 bays, and the like. As far as I can tell, the only thing that winds up being almost the same in every fire station that I've worked on is the bunk rooms. You know, the
Mhm.
finish has changed a little bit, but by and by, the bunks are all pretty similar. They've
Yeah.
been optimized to the limit. I mean, it's just, it's a twin XL bed with 3 shifts worth of cabinetry and so forth, and plus or minus 100 square feet. So they're
Right.
all kind of small, just ready go bunks. The rest of it, I mean, I wouldn't describe it like I mean, there are of course prefab fire stations that actually can be deployed, but our process is more, it's a little bit more like we provide the owners with a menu of options.
Yeah.
And then from that menu, there's still a variety of things that have to be totally customized,
Right.
that are operational specific. I mean, some fire stations, or most of the fire stations at this point load their bunker gear directly on the apparatus so that they actually get dressed on the way to the event. But there are all of these little various operationally specific things that happen, depending on where you are, that have to be taken into consideration for the whole thing to work well. I mean, most fire stations have decon rooms, but some fire stations do their decontamination off site. There's basically every single aspect of it. I'm actually been working on like a document to have for our office to go through like the variety of different option trees when we go through the programming stages, so that we can provide our owners with more visual uh, uh, a more visual programming exercise, I guess you would say.
Right.
I mean, commercial, like for instance, kitchens, like the kitchen is so important for fire stations, and some can be almost a completely residential kitchen where the brief from the owner is we want to be able to go to Home Depot and get a new stove because our firemen absolutely will break the stove, because firemen break everything and they know that, and we love that. And
Yeah.
they'll say it, right up front. They're like, we want the heaviest duty hardware that we can put on all of our cabinets, because if there's a way to break it, we will break it.
I want to use the best practices of Firehouse for my home because I break everything, and I need to engineer those kind of things for
Yeah.
myself. Even though it's just me with daily use. But anyway, it was kind of a loaded question, Cole, because really, obviously, people first is really where your orientation is. And you've even written a really nice essay about empathy in architecture. And so obviously that's a big part of what you do. We've talked to a lot of people about their practice. It's almost like being a designer and an engineer, but also like being a psychologist or a psychiatrist in some level, because you have to really understand what people really need, even if they can't articulate it that well. So do a lot of putting yourself in their place, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that as far as the art, like the thing that kind of separates architecture to me from a fine art, I guess you would say, is that aspect of empathy. Like if I'm painting a picture, or if I'm making a piece of music, I can do that for me. But
Mhm.
when I'm doing architecture, it's an act of creative empathy. It's if you're not taking the time to put yourself in the shoes of all of the stakeholders, you're doing everybody a disservice. You're doing a project a disservice. I mean, it's if it were my project for me, I would do it differently than I would do it for somebody else. And I mean, to me, that's the crux of it. I mean, I don't think that there's, whether or not you're doing a residential project and you've got a limited number of stakeholders, just basically the couple that you're building for. Obviously, it's very critical that you step into their shoes and know kind of the way that they live, and take the time to really spend time with them, understand them. But I would say the same is true for public safety projects. The same is true for even a commercial project when you have the opportunity to meet with stakeholders and talk with them.
Yeah.
We're working on a really interesting project for Selby Botanical Gardens, and going through and talking to the people that are working in the spaces and understand kind of the way they use it. And it's been a massive learning experience, because these are a totally different use type for us, and we're excited about where the project's going. But when you're designing, their priority, their priority is the plants that they're housing. And so it's like,
Yeah.
they're designing for plant comfort as well as people comfort. It's
Sure. Yeah. I'm sure. Well, I mean, obviously, the empathy is something that's very de facto across all this kind of multidisciplinary work you're doing, right? So it all starts with that. Just to take a little break to plug our sponsor. This episode is supported by Scan2Plan, and we're your architect first partner for LiDAR capture, point clouds, and Scan2BIM. So if you're navigating historic overlays or ops critical civic retrofits, Scan2Plan scopes what matters. We capture with terrestrial LiDAR, and we deliver design ready CAD and Revit against rigorous level of detail and level of accuracy, quality assurance. So you can lock adjacencies early and avoid site surprises. So it's capture that changes decisions, not just pictures. So Scan2Plan is the measure of excellence, and you can book a free 25-minute open out office hour session with myself via Owen Bush, and we can scope your next station or your next civic retrofit. So keep that in mind, Cole. We are looking to do some more projects in Florida. So
awesome.
So how do you let's talk about some of the renewal projects and net zero projects that you guys are doing with Sweet Sparkman. Repay Campus, what was this one about?
This was a lot of fun. This was actually an ideas competition that was sponsored through Architecture Sarasota. So Ian Pay was, I think his only work that he did in the state of Florida was for New College of Florida, and it was very early on in his career. I guess it was in the 60s. They opened up New College of Florida, which had this kind of radical and idiosyncratic tuition's not the right word, education system rather. And IMPay created this really interesting complex of dorms, and the dorms are unfortunately in a kind of a state of disrepair right now. And but given that its historical significance, the Architecture Sarasota partnered with New College to find a way to get basically just solicit ideas. What can we do with these buildings? And we went through the competition. We had a great experience. I was part of that team, and we fortunately won the competition. And as a result of the competition, the New College is still, looking to see what they can do to save as much of the Pay campus, the Pay dorms rather, as they can. Given the complexities of saving them. So they're looking at funding and everything. I'm not really sure exactly where the project's going to go. I know that we're at least in some way, I think, attached to it. But it was interesting. I mean, we had the license to do whatever we wanted as an ideas competition. And what we did was we tried to consider both New College's like evolving identity and where they are. So New College, up until very recently, was very much a interesting little liberal arts college, focus on this sort of customized education system where you basically would meet with an advisor and come up with your own curriculum. And they've been pivoting as part of the current administration's goal to make it accessible, because, you know, bluntly, the college was failing to maintain its enrollment.
Okay.
And so they've been looking to add sports as part of their offerings, more sports. So a baseball team and a variety of other kind of sports complexes. It's all part of an initiative. They basically, that entire portion of the campus, they are hoping to make like a really interesting sports complex, I guess you would say. And kind of right at the heart of that is these pay dorms. So we looked at ways of, we went through an exhaustive process of trying to figure out, well, what can we do with these interesting buildings that are broken up into a billion pieces? Because the way IMPay designed it was there are these like nodes within nodes within nodes. So, you know, you have these kind of very
just out of curiosity, how did you guys document that? Did you have good existing conditions, or did you have to do your own?
We actually had access to the original IMPay drawings. So we had we didn't do any LiDAR for this. I mean, I think if the project goes forward, we're going to need to go in and do that. We have an internal LiDAR scanner that we do a lot of we do for a lot of our projects. But in this case, we didn't use that. We just basically worked off of the original pay drawings, which were beautiful to look at.
You know, it's funny. Just aside, my uncle, my great uncle, was IMPay's model maker.
Oh wow, that's cool.
And it's, you know, he passed away long before I ever came into this industry, but I often think about it. I wish I could have asked him more questions about it, you know. But interesting to think about back then how they used to work, you know.
Yeah, I mean, the drawings are on enormous sheets of paper too. I mean, we don't have the original paper set, but we have the scan set, and I forget how big they were. They were really weird size too, like nothing standard about the size, but surprisingly sophisticated set of drawings for the period. Because you look at a lot of drawings around that time, and they're pretty minimal. You know, they provide the bare minimum amount of information. It's a lot about, you know, efficiency, I guess you'd say.
Sure.
Which there's nothing wrong with that. I kind of agree with that ethos to an extent, but these were a pretty comprehensive set of drawings.
Wow. So what's in all this? I'm sure it was a long proposal process and probably still is. So what's one move that you guys made that you're proud of, and what's one that you had to kill or you thought was better to kill?
Oh man, we had so many different ideas. We pitched an idea for turning one of the buildings into like a wellness center with baths and, you know, digging out part of the ground and filling, you know, with water. We had all sorts of crazy ideas.
Oh yeah.
We had ideas about using the roofs as like almost like auditorium seating that overlook the palm gardens. We had a bunch of different things. And what we settled on was we wanted to be able to maximize the amount of student participate, I guess you'd say, just activity within the palm garden.
Yep.
And create different experiences in each of the nodes, and preserve the facades as much as we could, and the perimeter facades. And
Right.
then, because the spaces are so compartmentalized, they're all very small, remove some of that so that, and put back in, usable program. But we have this like really cool gesture about making a big floating track above all of the pay gardens. And I vividly remember doing the presentation, and our Todd Sweet, our partner, was doing the presentation. And here comes the rendering, the video rendering coming up, and all of a sudden it overlooks this unbuilt baseball stadium, which our team basically just designed a baseball stadium, totally separate from this composition. Yeah. So there was something to look into, and just hearing all of the baseball players ooh and awe as soon as it came up to over the edge. So we killed a lot of ideas, but I think that what we came up with was a pretty sensitive design that meets
an incredible grid of for the outdoor spaces. It's sort of like a sort of a grid of these curving white things that create like a whole network up above of, like, you can see through the sky, but it also casts all these really incredible sort of bird's nest kind of shadows. And then there's also catwalks up above there, so you can look down on all this public space below. It's pretty interesting design for sure. I'd love to see this. Hope you have a chance to realize this project. It's really exciting.
Yeah,
like some kind of parametric design of what kind of parametric design did you use to like create this sort of weird, I don't know, it's not weird, but it's I don't know how to explain it. It's a nest of, it's sort of like a nest of white branches creating this transparent ceiling that's, I don't know, what is that, maybe 20-25 feet above their heads?
That sounds right. Are you asking about the tools, or are you asking about the kind of
I'm just looking at this. I'm looking at this sort of wireframe of the design of how all these, everything's all sort of bending together in this sort of beautiful parametric design.
It was fun. I mean, we had a team member that had this kind of, they proposed this idea, and the entire team rallied behind them.
Yeah.
And I forget the exact geometry of what all of the different kind of lines are referencing, but the original space has a series of palm trees that are evenly planted in the middle.
Yeah.
And the student body over the years has used this space pretty extensively as just kind of a blank slate to do all sorts of different activities in. Some of them would just hang up hammocks between one palm to another.
Right.
The trouble is that the palm trees don't really provide any shade, and all of the space there is, it's just paved. It's just a lot of pavement. And so you wind up with, it's kind of as kind of brutalist as it is architecturally, it's kind of a brutal space to hang out in for long periods of time. And so
yeah, right.
You want to create that lattice work so that you get a little bit of shade in the garden. And there is some sort of formal a logic to the way that the line diagrams work. Off the top of my head, I don't remember exactly what all of them are pointing to.
Yeah.
But we did studies in Rhino and Grasshopper and a variety of other tools. I mean, we did a variety of models and everything else to make it work.
Yep. It's amazing. So let's just talk very quickly about a project you also wanted to mention, which is looks pretty. It's a new project, which is the St. Pete's Sanitation Facility. That's a net zero project. So what was a strategy you took that made net zero real for the operators?
It was that project was City of St. Pete's first net zero project too. So it was a really exciting project for us. And you know, you think about solid waste processing, it's so critical to our community infrastructure.
Yeah.
And it's not something that a lot of people love to talk about because it's not the most glamorous job. And so having the opportunity to work on a project that and provide back to that community that makes everything work was really gratifying. I mean, we created this lovely outdoor space on the second floor that, you know, overlooks their, as wild as it sounds, you know, it basically just overlooks their yard of trucks. But
Right.
they take a lot of pride in their trucks, and they take a lot of, you know, pride in that, in those spaces. So, you know, we're using solar panels on the roof that provide the bulk of the energy back, and then we also provided solar panels out on the, you know, above some of the parking spaces and on the public side. And really, it was just all about making a facade that was as efficient as possible. You know, providing as much, you know, insulation as we could, so that to offset some of the needs of the some of the systems, the HVAC systems. Just look for every little way that we could to reduce reduce energy consumption.
Sure.
I think it's on track right now. It's either I think it's on track for LEED Platinum. I'm hoping.
Is it fully built? Is it operational, or is it?
It is. It's fully operational at this point. They're just
Yeah.
going through the last touches to get the project finished.
Wow, amazing!
Yeah.
Wow.
They've
So I'm
opened it.
sure that. Well, I would imagine that those things are probably pretty sophisticated as far as having like kind of advanced facility management and digital twins and all that kind of stuff for those classification of buildings. I would imagine. Is that? I mean, when you're designing a new building, what do you think about for, you know, pardon my ignorance, but some kind of digital twin for the life cycle of the building going forward, you know?
We didn't do a full life cycle analysis on the project. We weren't contracted for that, but we did a lot of complex energy modeling. Not in-house, of course. We consulted with a firm to do the energy modeling, and you know, project like that. I wouldn't say it's a full digital twin. Our workflow is not quite at that level yet, but
Yeah.
you know, we tried to model it to the greatest extent that we could to capture all of the relevant information so that the energy modelers could do their job appropriately. The project uses some really interesting materials too. Like we're using this really cool fully recycled brick from a company called Greenleaf Brick out of North Carolina.
Yeah.
No, as far as I can tell, there's nobody else like them at the moment, because they use 100% recycled material to make their brick. A good chunk of that is post-consumer. The rest of it's pre-consumer waste streams. But you know, as a result, you know, the building, you know, we're trying to kind of make sure that we're walking the walk as well as talking the talk. So it's a project for solid waste management. You know, the owners are, it's their administration building, and it meant a lot to them that we found a product that used a lot of recycled materials, and we've done that throughout the entire project.
So, I mean, a project like that's really governed a lot by, you know, all the net zero rules and the policy rules and the different overlays. And so, like, when you're doing that, like, how do you, you know, encode the constraints that you need, you know, for I don't know, project managing that, the checklist that you need and the validation of the model, and what's one example of that?
Well, there's just a lot of doing and redoing, to be honest with you. You know, there's a lot of iterating. So you get to a point, you do an analysis, you figure out that, you know, okay, well, you know, our energy consumption is higher than we expected because we're, you know, now having to, you know, condition this part of the building more than we anticipated. And so it's just this sort of kind of reciprocal loop of information that gets designed and then analyzed and then redesigned and then analyzed and redesign. There's probably more efficient ways of doing it. Ultimately, we're, you know, we're still evolving in our process to make make those efficiencies better, but you know, ultimately we got there with it, and it's a building that we're all very proud of. It's a beautiful looking building. It's a building that we you know, had the opportunity to put a lot of heart into for the sanitation department, which, like I said, does not get a lot of love. Yeah, there are a lot of checklists for sure. There's a lot of going through and managing making sure all of the consultants are not only coordinated with one another, but they're checking all of the information that is kind of outside of their ordinary scope as it relates to the net zero design strategies. It was a challenge. Credit to our entire team for making it happen.
So is there some kind of thing in a typical like workflow or new workflows that are coming out that you're intentionally avoiding or deliberately avoiding when you're doing these kind of like high tech net zero BIM projects, or, you know, whatever?
Our firm has, I would say, for better and for worse, we don't have necessarily a set process. And so I think that the thing that comes from that a lot of times is all of the individual staff members kind of lend their own level of experimentation to the project. And we hire a lot of young staff. And so, you know, we have a lot of really great fresh energy coming right out of school with people excited to try new things. I'm constantly playing with different AI tools. I'm working on, you know, any number of things to develop the standards, you know, any sort of thing I can better coordinate between our specs and our drawings. We always are looking for, but we don't have a set process. And I think that you see that in our work. And I think that's one of the things that makes us a really good service oriented firm, is because we're not pumping out product. We're really trying to represent the owners as best we can.
Yeah, it sounds like everything is very people centric and based in empathy, and then it just goes from there, which is makes a lot of sense.
I think to answer your question more succinctly, there's nothing that we shy away from, really. We're always eager to try something, and you know, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes we have to calibrate midstream. And I would say probably half the time we start with the technology, we're kicking ourselves in the middle of it, going, "Why did we try and learn this right now?" But yeah, you know, at the end of the day, it works out.
What are some things you've done in the past year, like integrating AI into your workflow or into your life?
I played around with code research is one of those things that's getting better with AI. There are a variety of AI tools that have popped up kind of around the space of code research that have helped sort of communicate in plain language. I'm sort of one of the code sticklers in my office anyway, so that very well might be out of my hands at a certain point, which I'm not mad at. But then,
I think a lot of that for me, it's about content, what do you call context engineering. So you're basically, you know, you can create a project where you give it all the context it needs to know about a certain topic, and it just lives in that world. You know, you can even disconnect it from the internet and just make it only know the world that you give it, right? But then it's an interesting process for me, like trying to do that. It's made me realize about all these other documents that I take for granted and other parts of the workflow that I don't even think about. But then I'm like, oh, for context, this makes perfect sense. And then when it sees that, it changes the whole way it looks at everything.
Totally.
So, but I think every firm should kind of have their own sort of database now of like what essentially every company sort of boils down to a bunch of KPIs, a bunch of numbers and historical data and stuff like that. Once it's given the context, it's really incredible what it can find, you know?
Yeah, we had the benefit of going to the AIA Florida conference this year, and there was a lot of discussion about AI. And you know, because our firm is so people first, you know, in terms of the way that we approach things, we're not necessarily using AI to its full capacity yet, but we see where where we're going. You know, we see where things are going, and we're trying to make sure. You know, we've experimented with it for early design conceptualization. We've messed around with it through renderings to see how we can incorporate it in this way or that way. I know our marketing team uses it for a variety of tasks. We're always kind of trying to push what we can do, regardless of the technology.
One thing that you're really looking forward to AI being able to do for you, and what's one thing that you just never wanted to touch?
Well, to me, I don't ever want it to come between us and the owner, or between us and really any of the stakeholders of the project. I think that, you know, from that standpoint, service first. You know, we have to service our clients, and part of that is being there, you know, and being present.
Yeah.
But in terms of, there's a load of different AI administration tasks that I would love for it to take over. I still don't want to give up detailing, and you know, the design is something I think that AI could assist with, but not something that it can drive. But I don't ever want it to. I don't want to give up on, you know, the detailing and the design, the client relations. But I'd gladly give it, you know, some scheduling tasks, that kind of thing.
So just to wrap up, I mean, I think it seems like, you know, really what you've been focusing on is precision with empathy, right? So what's one move that you're going to keep carrying forward into your next public safety project?
Not so much a move, but just an ethos, which is listen, provide our expertise, but, you know, we want to make sure that, you know, everybody feels like they've been listened to throughout the process. Give them the floor to explain where they're coming from, and, you know, continue to improve on, you know, at this point in time, I don't know, we've probably done like 40 fire stations or something like that as a firm. So, you know, it's always just a matter of just continuing to evolve and tweak and get better.
Well, that's great. Really interesting niche, and a lot of really interesting challenges that you're thinking about all the time that most of us never even think about. So thanks so much for sharing all that with us today, Cole. It's great to meet you, and would love to check out some of this work next time I get down to Sarasota. So once again, we're speaking with Cole Mears. He's an architect at Sweet Sparkman. They're based in Sarasota, Florida, and it's sweetsparkman.com. And this is the Practice Forward podcast. We're sponsored by Scan to Plan, the measure of excellence. It's scantoplan.io. And feel free to check out Sweet Sparkman. Check them out. Subscribe and follow Cole's thought leadership in a lot of these areas. So thanks so much, Cole. It's really great to meet you today.
Oh, it was great meeting you too. It was a great conversation. Had a good time.
Yeah, for sure. Me too. So once again, we'll see you on the next episode. It's Owen Bush signing off for the Practice Forward podcast.